To quote Colin Greenland, real genius is about lovable weirdos who squabble in the lab, play high-tech pranks in the dorm, and party in the lecture theater. The film is yet another celebration of the anxious wonder of growing up white, middle-class, and heterosexual in America. Released in the summer of 1985, most people don't remember this movie because it barely made a dent in the pantheon of pop culture. There's an episode of Mythbusters dedicated to disproving the movie's climax, in which the students blow up their professor's house with popcorn cooked by a death laser. It also inspired the creation of Gadget Hackwrench, a Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers character who is so beloved that there is a Russian cult that worships her as a goddess. It is called Gadgetology. With all that being said, Real Genius is my emotional support 80s movie. Val Kilmer stars as Chris Knight, a burnt-out college senior who was once considered to be one of the brightest minds of his generation. But his disillusionment with higher education and authority figures turned him into a major slacker. Other members of the ensemble cast include Mitch Taylor, child prodigy, Jordan Cochran, neurodivergent queen, and Laszlo Holyfeld, the genius who lives in Chris and Mitch's closet. Was that intended to be a gay metaphor? No. Will I be moving forward as if that was the intent? Absolutely. It's a moral imperative.
It's a moral imperative.
When they aren't working on Professor Hathaway's death laser, the characters do wacky things like turn their dorm's hallway into an ice skating rink and throw pool parties in the school's auditorium. It's an earnest but low-stakes affair that reflects the general sense of optimism upheld by mainstream understandings of the United States during the 1980s. No matter what happens, everything is going to be alright because there's no conflict that can't be solved with lighthearted ingenuity. What do you do when your professor abuses their position of authority and tricks you into building a weapon of mass destruction for your final grade? According to 1980s logic, the answer is simple. You destroy the house he built with embezzled university money using an ungodly amount of popcorn. If I was in a critiquing mood, I'd point out that Professor Hathaway is an antagonist who lacks any real depth. He's a narcissist who rides the coattails of his much smarter students. He belittles blue-collar workers to their faces, and one of the film's recurring jokes is that he hates the neighborhood dog, which is one of the laziest ways to convey to your audience that a character is an asshole. But these narrative shortcomings, if you could even call them that, don't bother me because as a former gifted kid, I find Professor Hathaway's comeuppance to be deeply cathartic.
Mitch, there's something you're going to have to understand. Compared to you, most people have the IQ of a carrot. We're different than most people, Mitch. Better.
Kids who are considered academically gifted are ironically set up for failure, and to an extent, Real Genius understands this phenomenon. So does Taylor Swift, but that's neither here nor there.
I was so ahead of the curve became a sphere.
Mitch and Chris are two sides of the same coin. They didn't make any friends in high school because they wrecked the bell curve. Teachers disliked them because they already knew everything the textbooks had to offer, and they were plucked out of this unfulfilling environment by Professor Hathaway. He was able to manipulate them because they lacked emotional intelligence. There's a reason this movie opens with Carmen McRae's cover of the show tune, "You Took Advantage of Me."
I have no will, you made your kill, 'cause you took advantage of me.
Mitch spends every waking moment studying because he wants to live up to Professor Hathaway's expectations, but that's impossible because Jerry Hathaway doesn't care about Mitch, or Chris, or Kent, the really annoying grad student who is pathetically desperate for the approval his mentor will never give him. Any waking moment the boys don't spend working on the death laser is met with Hathaway's scorn and disapproval because he frames leisure as a waste of their vast intellects.
I took a big chance in recommending a 15-year-old. I can see now that I made a mistake. Hope you're proud of yourself.
These guilt trips don't work on Chris anymore. He just wants to spend his final semester indulging in all the hedonistic impulses he ignored during his first 3 years of university. Hathaway responds to this newfound life philosophy by threatening to flunk Chris out of school if he doesn't finish the laser in time for graduation.
I screwed up.
What are you gonna do?
I guess I'll leave.
You can't do that. You'll be a failure.
Thank you, Mitch.
I find Mitch's gut reaction to Chris's situation to be hysterical because it's basically a representation of my subconscious's daily rhetoric. Don't be a failure. Don't be a failure. For the love of God, don't be a failure. So there are a couple of very obvious caveats to this rhetoric, all of which fall under the same primary question. What exactly is failure? The dictionary defines it as a lack of success, but I've come to understand failure as the best teacher I've ever had. School conditions us to dread making Fs because our report cards are supposed to reflect how successful we are at comprehending material, but grades are an inept system of gauging intelligence. Chris and Mitch are comparably brilliant, but no one finds Chris's unwillingness to apply himself to be respectable.
You can use your mind creatively.
I notice you don't study too hard.
Bingo.
Developing a sense of self-worth, independent of the parameters existing systems assign us, is essential for growing up and becoming an adult, but there's a crucial balancing act for this process. We can't just do what we want all the time, or else we'd be expelled. But to solely dedicate our lives to one outlet is to risk cracking under the pressure like Laszlo. Mitch is spared from this extreme binary and learns how to have the best of both worlds thanks to his two narrative foils.
He loved his work.
What's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with that, but that's all he did. All science, no philosophy. He loved solving problems. He loved coming up with the answers. But he thought that the answers were the answer for everything.
What's interesting about Laszlo is how the film frames him. Chris is only half joking when he says the most disgusting thing he's ever seen is Laszlo in his pajamas. According to Chris and Professor Hathaway, Laszlo is what failure looks like. But Laszlo is the character who achieves the most tangible success by the film's conclusion. He applies all of his energy towards winning prizes from a sweepstakes contest, and he achieves his goal. He even wins a beard! Success is difficult to measure because there's no real standard of achievement. An accomplished goal, no matter how small, is always worth celebrating.
These are entries into the Frito-Lay sweepstakes. No purchase necessary, enter as often as you want, so I am.
That's great.
I should win 32.6% of the prizes, including the car.
That kind of takes the fun out of it, doesn't it?
But they set up the rules.
So why this movie? What about it strikes such a chord with me? The short answer is I find it reassuring. I'm not the only person harboring an intense, bitter resentment towards the education systems that failed me. As a kid, I prided myself on making all A's and being gifted. But the older I got, the less those signifiers meant to me. I shaped my identity around being a good student, and desperately sought my teachers' approval because I thought their opinions of me reflected my self-worth. And this quickly became an unhealthy and unfulfilling cycle. When you're constantly pressured to achieve, actual success becomes less and less important because there's always another task waiting to be addressed. During graduation, I was awarded a medal for making all A's to earn my degree. It is the most useless trinket I own, which is saying something, because I collect a lot of junk. Awards are meaningless. Life's inherent value comes from the connections you make and the experiences you accumulate. Education is important, but being a good student isn't the same thing as being a good person. I wish I had known a Chris Knight. It wouldn't have fixed my college experience, but it definitely would have expedited the process of opening my eyes to the wider world. Then again, I want to wrap this video up with one final question. Why popcorn?
What's that smell?
Must be the dog.
That's popcorn.
Yes, sir, I know.
Get it away from me. I can't stand popcorn. I hate popcorn.
The English major in me sees it as an extended metaphor about how intense pressure manifests itself and pushes people to the point of internal combustion. But the transformative properties of that breaking point can lead to something that's awesome and liberating. Or maybe the filmmakers just wanted to do a fun prank with a tasty snack. The world may never know the true answer.